Reddit, the platform that never fails to deliver. With so much content up here that you can view, you'll never know exactly what you can find. Today, we'll be taking a deep dive on a post that I found on the RBI subreddit about a Redditor asking for help about a possible cover-up on their father's murder.
This is their story.
On April 5th, 2021 at 10:16 p.m., a Redditor of the name Dad Might Not Be a Murderer would make a post on the RBI subreddit asking for help about how to expose a possible cover-up over the mysterious murder of their father. Their post is as follows. Bear with me as I recount this to the best of my ability. I have to remain somewhat vague in some of the details in order to protect my anonymity. However, I will do my best to be as clear as possible about the series of events. In September of 2015, my dad's girlfriend Sherry started an affair with one of his friends Billy. Billy and my dad had been friends since high school and I knew him well. He was nerdy and kinda weird, but he was nice enough. My dad, not surprisingly, was pretty upset about the affair, but he and Sherry were already having relationship issues, and I think he was happy to find a reason to leave her officially. I know he had a few relatively cordial run-ins with Sherry and Billy as they all lived in the same town, but he had mostly cut them both off entirely. During this time, Sherry moved to a new house only a few streets from my dad. By Thanksgiving of 2015, my dad was roughing it a little. I think he was still kinda bummed about the affair, but he had recently been in a car accident resulting in him losing his job due to a back injury, so additionally, he was having some money issues pending a lawsuit settlement he was waiting on. By December, he was back on the mend and in pretty good spirits. We were very close and spent a lot of time together hanging out or going to bars/concerts. At the beginning of December at 8 a.m., my dad called me at work. We only spoke for about 10 minutes, but he was in a great mood. We had some laughs and made plans to hang out for the weekend. He mentioned very briefly that Sherry had called him about an hour earlier, but he ignored the call. I barely even remember him saying it. I got home from work that night and my phone rang. It was a family friend calling to tell me that my dad was dead, but she didn't have any other details. I was totally shocked. I had no idea what was going on and I was in instant denial because we just made plans. I had a million things running through my head: car accident, heart attack, etc. A few moments later, my dad's two brothers and my grandmother knock on my door. It was true, my dad was dead. However, the biggest shock was that Sherry was also dead. A murder / I could hardly believe what I was hearing. To add insult to injury, Billy was the one who found their bodies at Sherry's house and was currently being interviewed by the police. I took a call from one of the investigators on the scene. He mentioned that it was a cut and dry case. 2 adults deceased, each with a gunshot wound to the head. My dad was still clutching the gun. My dad was a hunter, so I was curious about the murder weapon. To my surprise, it was a small gauge handgun. But it wasn't my dad's, it was Sherry's. Odd, but okay. During this call, and I will never understand why he found these details necessary, but he told me that my dad and Sherry had consensual prior to their deaths. He also told me that there was a gap in time between the deaths, that likely my dad had killed Sherry, had instant regret, paced/considered his options, and ultimately decided to also. As I'm listening to this, I just cannot wrap my mind around any of it because it was just so out of character for my dad. And not in a, I don't believe my dad could do something like this kind of way. Like a real sincere confusion. First off, he wasn't even that depressed about the affair. They had already been split up for 3 months at this point and he was seemingly pretty happy in the wake of it all. Secondly, as I mentioned before, Sherry was living in a new house. My dad didn't know this house at all, so why/how would he have ended up with her gun in her house? He had his own guns. Thirdly, I knew that she had called him that morning and he ignored her call. It doesn't feel like someone desperate to kill another person would pass up an opportunity for an interaction with that person. None of it made sense, but I had to come to terms with the information I was given and trust that the police department knew what they were doing. Not to mention I had a funeral to plan and some deep grieving to do. A few days later, I made the trip over to my dad's house to collect his belongings and settle his affairs. His house was shockingly fully on, like lights on, TV on, cat not fed, and morning coffee still on the coffee table, back door unlocked, etc. It was like he raced out the door really quick with full intentions on being right back. This was not the home of someone who left with the intention of never returning. I know mental illness can/will do strange things to people, but if nothing else, he would have never let his cat go hungry. Yet another red flag in my mind, but I continued forth. Eventually, I was given some of his belongings from the scene of the crime by police, and my boyfriend decided to go through his phone to see if there were any signs of what might have occurred. We found that after I spoke with him, he did end up answering a call from Sherry which was around 11 seconds long, but we also found a slew of really weird text messages. None of the text appeared to have been from my dad because 1, he had terrible grammar, and 2, he didn't even know how to text. I never received a text from my dad my entire life. He had a flip phone with a T9 in 2015. So many people reached out to me saying this doesn't feel right, and I agreed. I didn't feel like any of it felt right, but I had nothing of any real substance other than gut instinct to guide me, which is not enough when dealing with police or investigators. At one point, I literally had to ask people just to stop telling me that they thought this was somehow a setup because I couldn't do anything about it, and I was starting to lose sleep over it. I was scared to death of turning into one of those people who obsess over something out of sheer denial. No one was going to take my plight seriously, and I already knew that I would be overlooked and disregarded. So for the last 5 years, I have done nothing but stress and silence, until now. This past Friday, I took a call from someone very close to my dad's friend group, urging me to push harder into reopening my dad's case. Recently, it has come to light that Billy's apparently a master con artist and a fraud. I guess Sherry's one of the 3 girlfriends that Billy has quote-unquote found dead since 2010. This is where I need your help, Reddit. Here's the information I was given. At some point prior to my dad and Sherry's death, Billy was dating a woman whom had recently come into money. Shortly after, this woman was quote-unquote found dead at the bottom of her stairs. Around the time that Billy started his affair with Sherry, she had recently inherited between $500,000 to $800,000 from her father passing away. Billy's current girlfriend has had organ failure since last year. She recently inherited a large sum of money, and Billy quote-unquote found her dead last Tuesday. Now, I know she was already sick, but the rumor is that she pleaded for medical help for days, and I guess he just basically let her suffer. I also found out that Billy took photos of my dad and Sherry's bodies before he bothered to call police. Why? He later showed these photos to his young daughter, double why. He has also told the story of how he found their bodies numerous times to the same person, yet the story has been told in 3 different ways. Did he take the photos as some sick trophy, or did he take the photos to be able to maintain his narrative? Upon learning this information, I kept thinking, but why would he have to kill my dad in order to steal Sherry's money? And then it finally dawned on me today that it was so my dad could be the scapegoat. He had to use my dad to portray a crime of passion scene so he could pretend to be a victim in the whole thing. Even though he was interviewed by police, it was just an interview, not an interrogation. The investigator said it was a cut and dry scene. They would have had no motive to interrogate him because as far as they could tell, the murderer was dead already. However, I do know there was about an hour in his timeline that day that went unaccounted for. Billy has a very high IQ. I don't think he would have been strong enough to fight my dad in hand-to-hand combat, but I very much believe he could have easily outsmarted him. My current conspiracy theory is that Billy went to Sherry's house that morning before work, had consensual with her, killed her, then used her phone to call my dad, which was the 7 a.m. call. My dad didn't answer the call, and Billy went to work to maintain his story. I think Billy then used his lunch break, the unaccounted for hour, and also the almost identical time of my dad's death, to go back to Sherry's house where he used her phone to call my dad again. This is the 11-second call that my dad did answer that caused him to race over to Sherry's house, leaving his house in the state I found it in 2 days later. I think he tricked my dad into coming to Sherry's where he would have been caught off guard and out of his element for an attack. I also think this could be where the gap in their deaths could be. I think Billy went back to work for the rest of the day and then found my dad and Sherry, where he took the photos and then called police. Here's my problem. I have no idea what to do. I don't know how to reopen a closed case. I don't have any direction on who to speak with. I have tried the police department who handled my dad's case, the local FBI, and the state attorney general, and no one can even tell me who could help me with this. Do I need a private investigator? Do I need an attorney? Is this worth looking into at all? I would love to clear my dad's name and take this terrible weight off of my family's shoulders once and for all. I am also fully prepared to accept that I could be wrong, but now I have to know. Any help is greatly appreciated. Redditors would start to pour in with their suggestions as to how to deal with the situation. One Redditor of the name Opening Thought 5736 would give some excellent advice. Their comment is as follows: your best bet here may be piggybacking onto the current situation with the newly dead woman where $10,000 is missing. If I was a grieving or angry relative of the woman who died with organ failure who pleaded for help with $10,000 missing, and you somehow made contact with me saying, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but there's something fishy about this man and I want to tell you more, you better bet I would track you down immediately to find out everything you could tell me. Dito, likewise, if I'm an investigator and there's any kind of actual investigation whatsoever going on into Billy now, finally in this new situation. I'm an investigator and you contact me saying you know something about this man and his history with women that you might think might be relevant to this case, and you want to be helpful, focus on helpful, yes, I'm calling you. Piggyback onto the current case. Use it to get law enforcement and investigators to listen to the information about your situation, and for it to be reactivated or at least significantly looked into based on that. Law enforcement and investigators listen to other law enforcement and investigators. If someone from jurisdiction XYZ where the poor organ failure lady died calls up on the law enforcement in your area and says, hey, I need to ask you some questions, let's look into this, they'll listen. I'm not saying that they will be open sesame to magically get all your painful questions finally answered and resolved, only that it might be your best bet at this point in shoehorning your way back into your dad's closed case. The opportunity just fell right into your lap, and someone notified you of it because this is what they want you to do it. This is great advice. OP should absolutely piggyback on the newly dead woman where $10,000 went missing related to Billy with law enforcement. This should possibly let law enforcement reconsider the severity of this case and reopen it for further investigation. Another Redditor would also reply to this commenter with them stating, you can probably FOIA any other documents relating to his past relationships also. Getting the relevant evidence and circumstances, time frames, cause of death, etc. will only help building the information case against the quote-unquote evidence that they have about your dad. Wishing you utterly the best in this tragic nonsense. This I also 100% agree with. OP could FOIA past documents relating to Billy's previous relationships to get more insight as to what could be going on here. 3 other Redditors would also suggest hiring a private investigator, with them stating, make sure that any inquiries about him are kept on the down low. If your suspicions are true, then he should not know that you are onto him. People like that will do anyone to silence investigators and prevent further disclosure, so remember to stay safe. I think a private investigator is the way to go. They have more resources. They aren't known to Billy and would not be easy to trace back to OP. They know what questions to ask and could follow him without his knowledge. I'd see a good private investigator first. Once you do this, they will look into it and should be able to tell you if there is something there or not. They have a lot more resources than normal people would and would likely have more relevant and honed skills than an average person. If they find evidence, that you may want to speak to law enforcement/prosecutor's office and show them the new evidence with your investigator. If you and your investigator have solid evidence and no one wants to give you the time of day, then you should consult an attorney, and it may take the right attorney to get this done, so don't be afraid to shop around for one if you just don't feel like the first one is taking you seriously or refuses the work. They will advise you how to proceed. Also, they may have police contacts or prosecutor contacts that can help. Your PI might have these too. Lastly, stay safe and avoid this guy. It sounds like he could be dangerous if this is all true, or he could hear about your investigation and become dangerous. I agree with these Redditors here. A private investigator more than likely has more resources and time to look into a case like this to gather more evidence on this situation. A Redditor who claimed they were a real attorney would even give out a helping hand in running a background check on this Billy guy to see if there was anything else they could find, which OP would respond saying they would reach back out. However, after this, there wouldn't be an update from OP for a while, until about 2 months later on May 29th, 2021 at 6:16 p.m, OP would make an update to everyone on a whole new post. That post is as follows. Update in the "My dad might not be responsible for a murder / from 2015. I am going to make this brief as there is really not much to update. I felt I owed it to everyone to update the current state of this conspiracy. I filed for the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, which is basically the general public's ability to gain access to certain information regarding open, closed, or cold cases. It took a while to get anything back on that inquiry, which didn't matter anyhow because it fell painfully short. I requested interviews, police reports, DNA information, and gunshot residue test results. Of course, I did not request crime scene photos as I knew eventually I may have to get there, but I thought by requesting what I did, I might be able to gain traction early on without having to look at my pictures of my dead dad. In true fashion, the email I received back basically just said, "Sorry, no information available." It was a little vague, so I'm unsure if it meant "Sorry, we don't have any of those documents period," or "Sorry, these documents are unavailable for release," which either way, it doesn't make me feel any better because that means there is very little on this case overall, or that the FOIA is pretty much a BS way of making people think they have access to this kind of stuff when they really don't. So dead in there. The second course of action I took was that I personally emailed the deputy police chief from the town he lived in and just kind of introduced myself, gave him the details of my dad's case, and said, I believe there's more information to be uncovered in this situation, and I think it would be worth your time to look into. Shockingly, he actually responded the very same day and said he was interested in speaking with me. Now, this was over a month ago and I have not taken the time to do this yet. There are a few reasons behind this. I did not expect to hear from him at all, let alone so fast, so I was a little unprepared, and that's my fault. I believe he is looking to speak over the phone and I would much rather do a face-to-face sit-down. I am very articulate either way, but I want to see his face to know his reactions. I want to see him writing things down / noting important points I bring up. I would feel like I was more hurt if he could see for himself that I'm not some crazy lady calling into the police department with this wild tale. I just want to know that I'm being taken seriously. I have additional information that I am trying to add to my portfolio before I sit down with police. I have a printout of a screenshot from Billy's ex-wife's Facebook page where she is just smearing the heck out of him, bringing to the table pretty much the exact same questions I have, and I ran a background check on him that showcases 19 court appearances regarding collections cases, all of which abruptly stopped about a month after my dad and Sherry died. I need more because what I have just isn't enough yet. I am considering reaching out to Billy's ex-wife to see if she might be interested in sitting down with me. Now that I know her stance on all of this, she could be a valuable asset to me. However, I am very aware that I could compromise my own safety if she declines my invitation and rats me out. I'm torn on this. Additionally, I have my dad's cell phone, and somewhere deep in the desktop archives is a very bad quality recording of the guy who Billy told the 3 different stories about how he found my dad and Sherry's bodies retelling their conversation. Furthermore, I am nervous that the police will take me seriously, and once things start unfolding, it's going to turn into a bad storm. I need to know that my mental health and personal affairs are prepared for finding out that I'm totally wrong about all of this, or I'm totally right about all of this. Both are terrifying. I have been extremely busy with work. I have a crazy high stress job, so I put a lot of this on hold myself intentionally because of that. I just can't manage the anarchy of the situation, plus losing myself every single day at work. Once that starts to slow down, I will dive deeper back into all of this and continue to update you all. I am still happy to accept any advice moving forward from where I currently stand, or any recommendations on things to add to my portfolio that I haven't considered yet. Again, thank you all so much for going down this rabbit hole with me. I am anxious to see it through to whatever the end might be. Redditors would also reply to this update with one stating, personally, I think it is a bad idea to wait so long after you yourself had pushed the deputy sheriff, and he was what I thought awesome to want to get with you and see what you have. I personally think it will come to nothing, but this is a great chance for you and you are blowing it. You needed to follow up on this great chance to get something done and / or hear what is up, and if you get him interested, he can make things happen and appoint someone to look into it. Once that happens, you can get moving onto this. Good luck and take care. I agree with this. OP should not wait on this any longer and schedule a talk with the deputy sheriff to try and pursue this case again. The same Redditor from this previous post named Opening Thought 5736 would give some excellent advice, with them stating, call tomorrow, get the admin, say that you are following up on his request to meet, explain that you want to meet in person, be willing to accept Zoom if you have to, accept the callback from either him or the admin and set a date, realize that your file is as absolutely perfect as it is ever going to be right now, realize that the true resource is you are the data and the information that you share, not the paper, not the documents, not the hard drives or flash drives. In no uncertain terms, do not be evasive with him whatsoever about any materials you have. Just come with everything, lay it all out and leave it there, have the meeting. I also agree with this. I believe OP should get all their evidence ready, whether it be perfect or not, and present it to the deputy sheriff to hopefully get this case restarted to be investigated. However, also after this, there wouldn't be an update regarding the situation until August 27th, 2021 at 4:18 p.m. where a third update would be posted by OP. That update is as follows. Third update in Dad Might Not Be a Murderer. Alright, so since the last update, a few things have happened. I reached out to Billy's ex-wife about a month ago. She was very receptive to speaking with me, but she also still has a daughter in high school that she is trying to protect, so our exchanges are rare and often at odd times. On Wednesday night, she called me at about 12:30 a.m. and we spoke for around 2 hours. She helped clear up a lot of questions, but as things do, it created a lot more questions unfortunately. Side note, I am working with an investigative journalist, so I'm starting to get the right kind of help, and she has been amazing. She will be out of town for 2 weeks, which is a bummer since we started to gain a little traction, but in the meantime, I plan to further our search in hopes that we can continue forth aggressively once she returns. Back to the phone call. Billy's wife, we'll call her Linda, is currently battling a second round of cancer and she is very sick. I think she is facing some feelings of morality and wants to get some things off of her chest. She is on oxygen and her timeline was a bit off, but I made sure to take notes throughout our whole conversation as to piece together what I could later on. Of course, before I updated here, I spent most of the day emailing the investigative journalist back and forth so that she had everything before she leaves. First off, she confessed an unknown, completely out of left field thing to me. She claimed to be in love with my dad. Anyway, she went on and on about how she always thought he was so handsome and so fun and such a man's man. It was honestly shocking, and I have to say that this being the very first thing she decided to open up about was both a little frustrating and off-putting. Linda is a lovely lady and I've known her since I was a kid, but I was not at all prepared for her to tell me she had deep feelings for my dad. The first thing racing through my mind is Billy. Of course, she was in love with my dad. Linda claims that Billy was totally unaware and non-suspect of her feelings for my dad, but I am not completely convinced of this yet. Linda proceeded to give me the timeline of events from her perspective. She started with her divorce from Billy. Linda claims that she and Billy's marriage was on the rocks, 2010 to 2012, unsure of the exact years currently, but around this period. She said they decided to take a family trip to Gatlinburg to try and repair the relationship. Their daughters were 2 and 6 at the time. Linda said as she is driving through the mountains, she and Billy begin arguing about her making a wrong turn. Billy proceeds to place his foot on her foot on the gas pedal and press it to the floor. She is desperately trying to keep the vehicle from going off the side of a cliff and she's pressing both the foot brake and the emergency brake. Finally, the car slows down. Their 6-year-old leaps from the car, Linda grabs their 2-year-old, and Billy proceeds to beat her on the side of a mountain with a toddler on her hip. She said a truck pulled up, pulled Billy off her, and called the police, and he spent the night in jail. They went home and she went forward with the divorce filings. A few years later, at the time of the affair/murder regarding my dad and Sherry, Linda recounted the way she knew the story to be true. This is where some of the details I know become foggy based upon what she knows. She claims that this particular Friday was Billy's night to pick their daughter up from daycare. She states that Billy's story is that he went to Sherry's house, found she and my dad, left in fear, immediately returned to call the police. Once the police were on the scene, Billy asked if he could leave to pick his daughter up and the police agreed. This is strange to me. It feels like not only is it weird that the police allowed this, but even weirder that Billy didn't just pick up the phone and ask literally anyone else in the world to go pick his daughter up. At this point, Billy picks up his then 8-year-old from daycare and proceeds to tell her in graphic detail how he had just found Uncle Shane. Linda said when Billy and their daughter entered her home, their daughter was in complete hysterics and Billy was ranting and raving about how he didn't have anything to do with it. A few things about this. Originally, I was told Billy had photos of the crime scene and that he showed them to his daughter. He might have photos, but as far as we know now, he did not show her photos. He just told her what happened. But she's 8. Also, something Linda thought was interesting about Billy's reaction is that at this point, she was only 1 or 2 people that had even spoken to him yet. No one was pointing an accusatory finger at him because no one even knew anything at this point. She just believed the way he was acting was very unusual for someone who just supposedly just happened upon 2 bodies. Next, there was some clarity about the girlfriend that he found at the bottom of the stairs. I literally just heard the story for the first time back in April when I made the original post. I still do not know the date of the incident or her name, but I do know for a fact that about a year after Billy quote-unquote found my dad and Sherry, his then girlfriend was found dead at the bottom of his stairs. Initially, I was under the impression that he had found her at her house much like he did with Sherry, but the news that this happened at his house was just mind-blowing, especially considering he and Sherry lived on the same street. Basically, the same man has now found 3 dead bodies all in the same block within a year of each other. He was able to explain this death away by claiming that she was a sloppy drunk. The investigative journalist is continuing to look more into this for me, as I have researched this in every way I know how via Google and just cannot find a thing about it, but I have heard the story confirmed by 3 separate individuals. After this incident, Linda said she could just not shake the sensation that something was wrong. so she drove down the street to the police department to plead her case. The lead investigator on my dad's case is now the deputy chief of the department. Linda spoke directly to this man who she said could not have been more disinterested in what she was saying to him. She said he didn't necessarily act like he was against the idea of Billy doing any of this, but more along the lines of just not wanting to do anything about it. To admit that Billy is guilty of any of this would bring to light the shortcomings of his investigation in both my dad's case as well as the situation with the woman at the bottom of his stairs. Linda said he was very quick to brush her off and send her packing, and she was very frustrated by this. This is important for everyone familiar with this story because I already reached out to this same officer back in April. He did agree to meet with me, but I was unprepared and wanted to make sure that I had my ducks in a row. I received a ton of backlash from many of my supporters because everyone thought I missed a huge opportunity. And at the time, I was really feeling the heat from this and hated that I chickened out. Knowing what I know now, I'm glad I didn't race in there sounding like a crazy person because I probably would have been treated the same way as Linda. And finally, I got the chance to hear directly from the horse's mouth about the most recent death in March of this year, which was Billy's ex-mother-in-law, Linda's own mother. Linda told me that when she found out Billy and her mom had started a relationship 9 years after the divorce, she was blown away. In fact, her youngest daughter, now 14, mentioned that grandma would be the next one dead. Mind you, this woman was also a severe alcoholic and was very sick. I do not know that she was necessarily near death, but it is assumed that Billy withheld medication from her leading to her early demise. She was 75 pounds the day she died. Billy and Linda got into quite the publicized argument a few days after the mother-in-law's death where Billy apparently exclaimed, "I let her die and everything she has is mine." Linda and Billy have not spoken since this day in early April. This is about where the conversation ended. I thanked Linda for giving me all this information and I let her know how much I appreciated the time she took to help me. To wrap all this up, the investigative journalist that has been helping me is currently filing for an FOIA the correct way. Apparently I either asked for the wrong things or I asked the wrong people. Regardless, she's filing it for me and will be going over everything. Today she asked if I wanted it sent directly to me or to her, and I told her I'd prefer to go to her because I just simply do not know what to look for. But I wanted to make sure that she notified me of anything she found interesting, whether it helped or hurt my case. And again, after this, there wouldn't be another update for a while, until March 31st, 2022 at 12:04 p.m. That update is as follows. Fourth update in the "My dad might not be responsible for a murder / from 2015. I am still working with the investigative journalist. Thankfully, she has not lost sight of our goal and I would be completely lost without her guidance and connections. We have recently started making some more headway towards a few unanswered questions, but as these things do, it takes time. She has involved a Freedom of Information Act expert that is helping get us going in the right direction. Each state / city / town / department has different rules regarding this, so she can only help so much. She also involved a retired private investigator who has taken a special interest in my case for fun, so that is really nice. Lastly, Billy has completely disappeared. He has not paid child support on his youngest daughter since 2020 and no one has seen or heard from him at all. This includes him being absent at his eldest daughter's wedding last year. I can't decide if this is going to help or hurt me. In a way, I feel like it just further proves his guilt and shame. But I also feel like if he's gone for good, I'm neck deep in creek. If I have no bad guy to point a finger at and no police department records to use against him, I have nothing at all. I will update as soon as I receive any additional information. Right now, I can go nowhere without the details from the police report, so until I get that or know exactly what all they are willing to give me, I'm kind of at a stalemate. Edit already. Almost as soon as I posted this update, I received an email from the attorney regarding the FOIA. He wants to schedule a call with me for this afternoon. I have reached out to the private investigator to see what I should be prepared to discuss. I did find out upon researching him that he is the attorney for the town that this happened in, so I'm not sure how that will help or hurt me. I am concerned that his best interest will be protecting the police department that he looks over, but I am still hopeful that maybe he will be more interested in getting the right answers and not further protecting those who have complicated this for me. I will be going straight to my mom's before the call because I would like to record it in case he gives me BS. I will report back. Edit 2. Hey y'all, so the call went pretty well. He is young and seems very intrigued by this entire tale. He made mention that this was nowhere at all on his radar and wanted to know as much as I I could jam into our 20-minute call. Unfortunately, he has asked me to meet with the deputy chief next week. Conveniently, sarcasm, this is the same man who was the lead detective on my dad's case 6.5 years ago, and the second or third time he has been brought into my line of fire and did absolutely nothing to assist me. I did not make the attorney aware of this, and for the sake of the conversation, I agreed to meet with him. I also recorded the conversation to add to my portfolio. Thanks for all of your help. On December 15th, 2022 at 3:59 p.m., OP would make a fifth and probable last update to this whole situation. That update is as follows. Fifth and probably last update in the my dad might not be responsible for a murder / from 2015. Sorry to have gone off the grid for so long. I have had a whirlwind of life-changing events. My father-in-law passed away in April, my relationship of 12 years ended in July, and I have recently just celebrated the 7th anniversary of my dad's passing, so life has been both busy and hard for me lately. So back in April, about 2 weeks before my father-in-law passed away, my mom and I met with the deputy chief, lead investigator at the time of my dad's case. He was surprisingly very receptive, kind, and understanding. A few things that happened in this 2-hour meeting were both shocking and frustrating. He sat down with my mom and I, heard our plight, and then continued forward on his stance that to him, his team, and their evidence, he still feels strongly that the correct judgment was made on the case. He said he understood where my head was at and definitely accepted some of my concerns surrounding Billy and the deaths of his other girlfriends. He happened to also be on the scene for the woman who fell at the bottom of the stairs, and also cleared up some confusion about that for us. Of course, he said that he specifically remembered Billy from my dad's case only a few years earlier, but said that Billy was not as receptive or helpful in the case of the girlfriend number 2. However, he said that the details I was giving about girlfriend number 2 were not exactly correct. Yes, there was a second dead girlfriend around 2017, but he recalled a scenario where she drunkenly fell midday off her porch as the result of some sort of aneurysm type scenario. He said this was universally agreed on by many on the scene given the fact that her body was just absolutely covered in multiple unidentified party bruises, both old and new. Those who were familiar with her attested to both her drinking problem as well as her constant injuries, and from their accounts, this was an accidental death caused by the woman herself. Although the deputy chief said that he found it extremely odd that Billy was so standoffish, he said that Billy was upfront about feeling like he was going to start looking like a villain instead of a victim. Still, I am not convinced, but the DC is. He said he definitely agreed that Billy is weird, very unlucky, and just an all-around strange dude in general, but he said he was about 80% certain that this was another circumstantial situation that Billy had found himself in, and again, he was questioned and free to go once they came to their conclusion. He said there was just not enough to go off of, and being weird isn't indicative of guilt. He was unaware of the death of girlfriend number 3, Billy's former mother-in-law that he had been sleeping with from the time that girlfriend number 2 died until number 3's death, which was ruled accidental as well, as that happened in the city and not the town DC is in, so he had no dog in that fight but did raise an eyebrow when it was brought up, which, I don't know. It's not his jurisdiction and there's really nothing he can do about it other than agree that it's suspicious. This one's the worst. I'm guessing that because I have been so involved with this, DC assumed that I had grown accustomed to the details of my dad's case, but as he was pulling files around my dad's case and making copies, he tossed a manila folder on the table that upon opening had an 8x10 photograph of my dad's body. My mom and I both audibly gasped. It was unreal. I still can't believe I saw that. I had done a really good job this entire time of having the luxury of assuming what the scene looked like without actually seeing it. This was the first time I had seen any photos of the crime scene at all, and it was very hard for me. One good thing about all of this is that due to the semi-consistent communication that I have with Billy's ex-wife, remember, Billy and his wife had been around since I was a child, so I know them both very well, I explained to DC that he had more or less disappeared off the face of the earth. His ex-wife was recovering from cancer, he hadn't paid child support in years, he wasn't present at his oldest daughter's wedding, etc. DC did manage to at least track him down to some extent and report him to the child support court, so his wages started getting garnished and his ex-wife finally started getting a little bit of money out of him to support the kids that he's ran out on. I have heard that recently though, she has stopped receiving payments again. One more thing, for some reason, I am back on believing that Sherry's brother still has something to do with it regarding money. I honestly still feel like he talked Billy into this with the promise of a payout on the back end. Why else would her only biological sibling not care about his sister's house being covered in emergency vehicles on a Friday night? Something is still off there, but I can't decide what yet. Rounding this out, and I'm sure I will think of any other things that I have left out and or edits to questions from comments, etc. So feel free to comment any concerns or thoughts you might have. After all this, however, there hasn't been a further update from OP. I'd imagine we will hear something more from OP since they decided to keep Reddit updated regularly on this situation. Hopefully all goes well in the end and OP finds the truth as to what really happened to their father. But alright, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. What did you think of this post? Did you think it was real or fake? Personally, I think it's real. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. But as always,
Have a nice day.